So he puts me through, and I'm talking to this police chief. His name is Mike Pitko. I say, hey, there's a guy that used to work there, so he says, and I think he's a fraud. I don't know. He's claiming some college degrees that we don't think he has. I'm trying to investigate this. I'd like to get a hold of his employment application. He goes, Lanterman, I knew there was something about that guy. But if you look at the timing on it, he was deposed on February 11th. February 12th, he emails the police chief and says, hey, I just wanted to check if my personnel file has been destroyed pursuant to the retention policy. And then the next day on the 13th, he says, okay, do you mind if I drop by tomorrow to take a look? He stops in Pennsylvania, goes and picks up this personnel file. And as of March 19th, he still hadn't mailed it back.
This is a real thing. Real thing. None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Okay, we're back on the Wedge Live podcast, and by now you have heard, all of you, the story of Mark Lanterman, the computer expert, the frequent expert witness who has had his credentials called into question. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office has said they won't rely on him as an expert anymore. The FBI is poking into it. And I have a special guest today to talk about it. I'm joined by Sean Harrington, the Wisconsin-based lawyer who brought Lanterman's alleged fakery to light. Sean, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I have provided you here with the exclusive interview. I've declined other interviews, and this is, of course, a segue into the 4-part Netflix series.
I think so. One of the court filings you posted, it may have been the one from Florida, called this a Hollywood story, and it really is. I can see it.
You looking for some feedback on that, or need to
yeah. I mean, you brought up Netflix, and I think I posted about a 4-part Netflix documentary, and it feels like that kind of story. We're going there.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a possibility that we'll see some sort of a movie or something out of this, because it's been going on, as far as I can tell, for at least 20 years, and there have certainly been some interesting plot twists along the way that make the story a little almost incredulous.
So let's start at the beginning. Maybe not everyone is familiar with Mark Lanterman. Who is Mark Lanterman? He's a computer expert. You've called him a digital forensic fraud. What kinds of cases would he have been an expert on? Like, who is this guy?
Sure. Well, I mean, I want to back up with that word fraud and make sure that we have a kind of a clear definition, because that's a very pernicious and serious allegation to levy against anyone. And if you kind of, I don't have a dictionary handy, but if you go and look at the meaning of that word when it's used as a noun, it's really talking about an individual who has misrepresented some significant aspect of his or her work or credentials or background or identity. So I think, given what I've uncovered and the evidence in terms of deposition testimonies, testimony under oath, documents, among other things, that I'm very comfortable using that particular word to describe Mr. Lanterman. So indeed, he is a computer forensics expert. We don't usually use that phrase anymore, because everything is not everything, but a lot of things now are in the cloud. They're in mobile devices, and they're in places other than personal computers. So that phrase has sort of fallen by the wayside maybe 10, 15 years ago. So we now call folks in this industry digital forensics experts. And there's a lot of different fields. There's cell tower forensics, there's mobile device forensics, cloud forensics, memory forensics, personal computer forensics, which we were alluding to a moment ago. There are a lot of different sub-disciplines in it, and anyone who purports to have expertise in some or all of those that I mentioned would be colloquially referred to as a digital forensics expert.
You've also said that he will claim expertise in whatever is like the new big thing that everyone is talking about. Like you mentioned recently, he has claimed to be an expert in deepfakes. This is a case where he's like, whatever is going viral, whatever is making headlines, he will latch on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's very successful at marketing. I think he probably is, if I had to guess, a much superior marketing professional than he is anything else. And so he keeps his finger on the pulse of what's interesting and intriguing out there, and so does everybody. I mean, if you look at LinkedIn or whatever, it's right now AI is all the rage, and quantum computing, and believe it or not, there'll be something else 5 or 10 years from now. And so he's obviously reading the market about that, and then he will adapt his CLE presentations and seminar presentations to cater to that, and people want to hear about it, and they think he's an expert. So that's an opportunity for him to get out there in front of folks and do that marketing, lead folks to believe that he is indeed an expert in the area, and then of course the work will come, and then he has people back at the office who are doubtless scrambling to actually meet those deliverables that the clients bring in.
And he is constantly on the local news here in the Twin Cities area. Just he is the go-to expert.
Yeah, he's on the news regularly, maybe weekly or a couple times a month. Whether it's the Target breach and NPR is interviewing him, or whether it's a data breach at the within the school system or a hospital network, whatever. He's sort of become the go-to guy. And he's does a lot of traveling for someone who purportedly has a terminal diagnosis, as we've been told. It does a lot of conferences around the country, judicial conferences, and a lot of rainmaking, so much so that it's a wonder how he might even be able to stay on top of the technology and be an actual practitioner.
You put a lot of research and work into his background, finding these discrepancies. What caught your interest about Mark Lanterman and made you think, I need to look more into this guy?
Well, I knew about him since, probably 2004 or 5. And he may not recall this, but I actually asked him for an interview and a tour of his facility when it was Eden Prairie, because it was around that time, 2005, 2007, that I was looking at starting a business, and I wanted to get an understanding of what it looked like, what the lay of the land was. So he graciously provided a tour way back then. A very nice, personable guy, which I think is definitely key to his success. Having the charisma and the ability to the bedside manner, if you will, with clients. It's very important to have. And then I started to hear rumors, gossip over the years, and lots of it. And just when I thought I had heard a really outrageous, egregious story from a lawyer or whatever, I'd hear another one. And these things really aren't actionable. If you're an attorney, you know that you really shouldn't be repeating these things, because without firsthand knowledge, they could be defamatory. And so I really wasn't interested in repeating it or exploring it. I had no reason to. My business and my client base is not built on tearing anyone else down. I don't need to do that. There's frankly plenty of work to go around and share with each other, honestly. So I ignored it. And indeed, I remember March 3rd of 2012, I received an email from someone who actually pointed out to me that there was a question about whether or not the 2 degrees had been awarded legitimately from the alleged academic institution. And, I remembered it. I took note of that comment and didn't do anything with it. What am I going to do with that, right? It has nothing to do with me. And over the years, I'd get phone calls from people occasionally, lawyers looking for dirt, and I didn't have anything to give them. I said, I really don't have any personal experience with Mr. Lanterman. I think I've opposed him on one case, and I had a real problem with the way with what was in the report, frankly, that I was addressing, and I didn't think it would be suitable to attack Mr. Lanterman. So I actually, in my response to his report, I actually suggested that it must have been drafted by somebody else, maybe an intern, and he just sort of signed off on it because surely this couldn't have been his work. I really tried to be gracious about it and to not get involved in the gossip, and now I question that, because maybe if I had, if everybody says it's not my business, and how many people have been harmed in all these years, in the intervening years, that everyone said it's not my business, and they did nothing, and they took no action, and they didn't look into it. So I got involved in this in September of 2023, and that was when I guess I should back up and mention that I'm a volunteer investigator for the Office of Lawyers Professional Responsibility in Minnesota, which just simply means that I'm one of many other volunteers that investigate attorney misconduct complaints. And I think the office delegates some of the lesser serious, less complex matters to volunteers to investigate, and they keep the more high profile and more complex matters in-house. And I've been doing this now for about 10 years. I also do it for Wisconsin, although that was just a recent thing, about a year ago in May that I got signed on in Wisconsin. But anyway, we have an annual Lawyers Professional Responsibility Seminar. And I looked at the agenda and I saw that he was speaking. And I was very annoyed right off the bat because of what I knew about him. And I felt I was already in a bad mood, shall we say, that this person had been selected to present to us on the topic of ethics at an ethics seminar. So I begrudgingly attended through Zoom. After COVID, they let us call in if we don't want to drive down there. I didn't feel like driving, so I called in. And as soon as he opened his mouth, he began telling falsehoods. And I described this in my article in some detail, exactly what the falsehood was. And I don't think the other audience members would have known. I think that's, again, part of the key to his success is he's catering to an audience that doesn't know anything about cybersecurity, doesn't know anything about coding, malware, information security, product security, ransomware. Any of these topics are sort of all, a mystery to the lawyer and judicial audience. So whatever he says is, super intriguing, and they sort of take it at face value. So I heard him speaking and saying things that immediately I knew were false, only because of my background. And now that caused me to listen up and pay attention. But as I describe in my expose, he then engaged in what I think is unambiguously unethical conduct. I don't think reasonable minds would even differ on this. And that is to say that he described finding breach data in the dark web that corresponded to a law firm, and he described how he contacted the law firm, and he said he offered his services. Now, that's something that lawyers can't do, by the way. Right? That's ambulance chasing, and we're a lawyer audience, so I frankly, I don't think that is the kind of business practice that should be exemplified by a speaker at an ethics seminar, but whatever. And he then displayed the profile and law firm information for the victim, the breach victim. And he talked about how he contacted the victim, offered his services. The victim declined the services. And then Mr. Lanterman said, well, I call you, I offer you my free services. You don't want them, you turn them down, then you get to be part of my presentation. And everybody laughed. Everybody thought it was a joke. And I was outraged. I was absolutely outraged. But he didn't stop. He kept going. The next thing he said, he started displaying a confidential memorandum from the law firm that was in this cache. And it was a memorandum discussing how the law firm had inadvertently disclosed data to another law firm, and they needed to claw it back. And he thought that was funny. He poked fun at it and said, they seem to be having a real hard time here, aren't they? And everybody thought that was funny. And he said, but it wasn't just law firm data. It was also client data. And then he posted on the screen behind him an unredacted passport. And it turned out to be a passport for a client who apparently also is a lawyer in New Jersey. And so then he goes through the same story. He calls the victim. He says, I'm not sure if you know who I am. My name's Mark Lanterman. You can look me up on the internet if you're unsure. But I have stumbled upon your confidential personal data on the dark web, and I'd like to offer my services to you and help you navigate through dealing with all the difficulties with a data breach. And the victim allegedly said to him, I'm sure you're mistaken. My confidential data has not been compromised. And Lanterman said, oh, but in fact it has. I can read the passport number for you if you like, sir. And then he displayed this man's name and profile photo. His name was Aaron Stiefel. And he said, went through the same thing. Mr. Stiefel, I guess, hung up on him or politely declined his services. No problem. You get to be part of my presentation too. And everybody laughed. And then to great effect, he said, and it turns out he's the lead counsel for Pfizer. And then there's this dramatic pause so that everybody can take a deep breath and gasp that the lead counsel of Pfizer had been compromised and had been so foolish as to turn down Mr. Lanterman's gracious services. And meanwhile, of course, I was just absolutely outraged. I was actually calling the director of the OLRP on her cell phone to ask her to get this guy off the stage, and she wasn't picking up. I was absolutely outraged. He then went on to tell a story about a Minnesota pharmaceutical company called Upshur Smith, which has since been bought out. And he talked about how the CEO had left for Taiwan, and the company was very proud of that. He was going to some sort of a business planning conference or something, and they foolishly announced it in a press release. And someone used that information to perpetrate a CEO phishing scam. So someone purporting to be the CEO contacted the CFO, he claims, and described how I'm out here at this conference. I'm trying to close a deal. I really want to keep this on the lowdown. I'm going to need you to wire me $50 million. But the CFO was an idiot. He used that word idiot, not just at the conference I was at. There's even a YouTube video of him giving the same talk to the Rotary Club, but he called the guy an idiot. And he said, all he had to do was pick up the phone and call the CEO and he'd be a hero. But he's not a hero. No, he's working at the Arby's on 61 in Plymouth. And you know what? They won't even let him on the register. And everybody laughed. They roared. Everybody laughed. We had lawyer regulators there. Volunteer investigators were there. Everybody was laughing. They thought it was a big joke. Like everything else, I looked into it. Turned out to be false. I pulled out the court documents. The CFO had nothing to do with wiring $52 million. It was somebody much lower in the reporting chain. He didn't find out about it till 2 weeks later. He's not working at Arby's. He's actually with CFO for a company down in Mankato, and it's a pretty long drive from that location to the Arby's in Plymouth. This was just something that Mr. Lanterman made up for the audience amusement, and he defamed this man. Who didn't even know that he's been running around telling this defamatory story. I actually spoke with general counsel at that company, at Upshur Smith, and he was very offended. They apparently have a good relationship with the former CFO, and he said, I'm going to let our president and CEO know to reach out to him because this is really, really awful to hear that this is happening. So, and to know that he used a platform at an ethics conference for lawyer investigators and regulators to tell these defamatory tales and to mock ransomware victims and to describe activities of embarrassing people for declining his services and to tell lies for the audience amusement was just shocking to me. And when I saw that, the gloves came off, and I decided I'm going to start looking into all these stories. I'm going to find out what this guy's about because I'm very comfortable in saying that there's some subterfuge going on here, and I'm going to get to the bottom of it. And I did.
So it goes back to the idea that he's just a master marketer, kind of a performer. Like he's putting on this very entertaining for the people in the room performance and kind of inventing details that make his story more compelling about other people. And like one of the things you will find out is that he's also making up stories about himself to make himself seem like more interesting, compelling, more qualified as an expert. So I think one of the things that's getting a lot of attention is the whole Harvard Online versus Harvard University thing. He claimed Harvard University, and here's what he said in a document. I completed my postgraduate work in cybersecurity at Harvard University, which would make you think, well, he has a doctorate or something from Harvard University. You tell one story about a deposition where he was asked by a lawyer, should I be calling you Dr. Lanterman? And he replies, no, Mark is fine.
Very gracious, isn't he? Yeah, very gracious. I think the hallmark is not just, or the speaking style or approach is not just self-aggrandizement and embellishment, but it's also equal parts of tearing other people down, calling people idiots. He is very fond, it would seem, or very keen on characterizing detectives and cops as being bumbling idiots and incompetent, and that he needs to be brought in to work on it. He, in one deposition in a completely unrelated case, that's how he characterized his work in the Stephen Allwine murder trial. And he went on to say that, personally, I conducted all of the analysis in this case. And I don't know if that's true or not, but even if it isn't true, it creates a real problem now for the state, because he's under oath saying that Mr. Allwine is in prison because of the work he did, because of the Bitcoin address that he allegedly found. And I don't know that if anybody went back and corroborated that, or if they just took him at his word for it. But I think that's really it's one part self-aggrandizement and one part tearing other people down and mocking people for audience amusement. And I'm really disappointed that these audiences eat it up. And by these audiences, I mean judicial conferences, judges, people that are deciding our fates, that are deciding our liberty, who are deciding, the hundreds of millions of dollars in various types of disputes, civil disputes, trade secrets, securities litigation. And these people find him to be entertaining, and for some reason are not able to have sufficient discernment to realize that they're being duped, and that's very troublesome to me. It really is.
I'm going to go through my list of favorites. Favorite Mark Lanterman biographical details that may not be true. The claims about speaking at various high-profile conferences. There was an article in Sea Level magazine where the claim is made that he went on to become the senior forensic analyst for the United States Secret Service Electronic Crimes Task Force. There's the discrepancies in the length of time that he claimed to work with the Secret Service. One of them was 30 years, and then sometimes it's 5 years. That's fun. Are there any others?
8 years. Oh, yeah, there's 8 years in one deposition that I've posted. There's, most of them say 3 years, which is probably closer to the truth. This is probably one of the more boring allegations. I mean, and it's very difficult to prove because if you try to file a FOIA request with the Department of Homeland Security and mention any individual by name, you're going to get a denial on the basis of a privacy statute. So you're never going to find out how long he was there. I think he probably did work for the task force, and I think, in fact, they recently confirmed it. But of course, that doesn't mean that he was being truthful, because, as you point out, there are all these different lengths of time, and some of it you could chalk off to faulty memory. If in one deposition he said 5 years and another one he said 4 or 5 years, who's going to make a big deal about that? But 8 years, 3 years, the 29 years or nearly 30 years is actually something in the ABA article that arguably he didn't write. But I've also got him in another deposition saying he reviews all biographies before they go out. So if you see a biography at St. Thomas University School of Law, if you see a biography for the Insurance Risk Management Institute, if you see a biography for the Judicial College in Reno, Nevada, if you see a biography on any one of these other locations, you've got him saying under oath that he's reviewed all those things before they were posted. So if you've got an article that got put out by the ABA that says it was almost 30 years. The assumption here is that based on what he said, he reviewed that before it was published, and he was comfortable with them saying, 29 years.
Are there any others, any other discrepancies that we should be highlighting?
Yeah, I mean, the big ones that stick out for me are, claiming that, I train the entire federal judiciary annually with the Federal Judicial College the Federal Judicial Center in Washington, D.C. Turns out that no, he gave a couple of Zoom conferences back in 2016 and 2017, and I think is a 90-minute one in 2018. So clearly he's not faculty. He's not training the entire federal judiciary annually. And he made these statements under oath in the year 2022, just a couple years ago. It still says that at the St. Thomas University College of Law today on their website. And they've been advised that it needs to be corrected. They fixed it and then they changed it back again. I don't know why. But it's false. And of course, the biography on the website is not under oath, but there are statements under oath where he was making this claim. Another one that's more recent is he claims to be on the steering committee for artificial intelligence and the law for the Sedona conference. Now, the Sedona conference is a group of legal professionals who have published guidance on electronic discovery practices, how you should exchange information and discovery that's found in the form of electronically stored information on computers and servers and whatever. And he's been claiming to be on that steering committee for going back at least a year into 2024, maybe earlier. I don't have that committed to memory. It turns out that steering committee wasn't even convened until last month in February. It didn't even come into existence until last month, and he's not on it. And the executive director for the Sedona conference denies that he has ever had any leadership position in the organization. Now, I don't know, maybe the guy doesn't have his facts straight, but if I can't find a better authority than the executive director, I'm not really sure where I need to go. So I think that, those are two that come to mind. There's a lot of other stuff that I haven't dug into. There's a variety of certifications that I haven't looked into. Some of them are government issued. It's unclear whether they have expiration dates or you just show up for 2 weeks at some training and you get it and you keep it for life. I'm not sure on that. I think the big one for me is the college degrees. On the Harvard University thing, I think someone could argue, oh, that's just an embellishment. I mean, I think it's reasonable minds would not differ that there is an intent to mislead with regard to the Harvard. I also find it quite amusing that his attorney, who supposed to be one of the sharpest litigators around, but I'm not impressed so far, he's advanced the argument that even if his client committed perjury for 20 or 25 years, if we could just set that aside for a moment, that he lied under oath dozens, scores of times, just put that aside for a minute. Technically, it's postgraduate studies because he did, in fact, graduate from high school. And actually, I don't know that that's true either. I haven't looked into that. I mean, I don't know. I might leave that for someone else. But I think the Uppsala College degrees issue is really front and center. I do not believe he's going to be able to produce a diploma or diplomas. And he is going to continue to make it appear as though we have failed because we can't prove a negative. Right. And, I don't know about you, but it was always my understanding that if you have degrees or credentials, the onus is on you to prove up those credentials. The onus is not on the rest of the world to prove that you didn't go to a place you said you went.
I am looking forward to talking about this. I have a whole long section from that court filing, the motion to strike Lanterman's expert witness testimony in that Florida case. I'm going to read a whole long section from that. But before we get to that, there's like a Forrest Gump quality. I don't know if you've looked into some of these claims, but like he claims to have been involved in like the Martha Stewart case. I think you mentioned Bernie Madoff was another one, like a whole bunch of like celebrity kind of big name cases that he claims to have been affiliated with.
Yeah, I was never able to verify any of those things, but I did interview a former employee of Computer Forensic Services who provided a lot of intimate information to me. and also to federal authorities. And in that interview, that individual, and I just want to point out here that, I'm not able to fact check all of this information. So in a way, I'm a blogger / journalist, and I need to make sure that I qualify anything that I share by saying that it's alleged. And if you're not comfortable with some of these disclosures, we certainly will, edit them out before this video becomes final. But he told me when I questioned him about those things that Mr. Lanterman would take credit for even the tiniest, most insignificant involvement in any case. So, for example, if somebody working on the Bernie Madoff case, anybody working on it, could be some low level, somebody with the Department of Treasury or whatever. If someone called him and tried to bounce an idea off of him, he'd take credit. He was involved in the Bernie Madoff case. I'm not going to call Paul McCartney or Martha Stewart to ask them if they've heard of Mark Lanterman. I certainly could do that, but I think I'm going to leave them out of it for right now. And I think we have enough to work with that we don't need to do that. Now, I would ask Bernie, but unfortunately, I understand he died in prison a couple of years ago, so he's not going to be able to tell us all the amazing things that Mr. Lanterman did or didn't do to land him in jail.
I'm going to go through a couple of things Lanterman has said in response. He said, no motive, reason, or incentive to fabricate academic credentials. He has called this a smear campaign. He told a judge he has questions about speaking of the attorney's motivations, and that he fears for his family's safety. So what would be the motive to fabricate your academic credentials?
Well, I think one of the people I talked to who is or was close to him had repeatedly described it as a fake it till you make it approach. And I of course don't know, but my guess is that at some point in time, I'm theorizing here, so these are just allegations and speculations here. I think that at some point in time, he may have felt compelled to say that he graduated with these degrees in order to either get a job or to have some credibility that he felt the clients needed. I don't know when he started doing it. That's, of course, why I wanted those employment records from the 90s. And I think that once you tell a lie like that, if you're comfortable lying, and he clearly is, and that's a statement I can stand behind for sure. But if you're that comfortable lying, then you just keep adding to it, and then you'll get some accomplishments, you'll get some accolades, you'll so a lot of the stuff on the resume is true, but it's all built on that foundational lie. In terms of my motivations, as I think I made clear from the outset, this is about justice. I don't compete with him any more than a podiatrist would compete with a head and neck surgeon. We're both doctors. Well, I don't think he is, but in my example, they're both doctors, but they have a completely different patient base, and if anything, they might even refer patients to one another. So he's testified under oath that he does not do any criminal defense, and he does 80% civil, trade secrets and other stuff in federal court. And I do the opposite. I do almost exclusively criminal defense, not by choice. It's just sort of an organic development. I did good work, and people started handing my name around, and all my work comes from clients and referrals from clients. So it's not from website traffic or anything like that. And so I'm doing almost entirely criminal defense work, almost entirely in Wisconsin, a little bit in Minnesota, very few civil cases. I don't even like them because of the e-discovery disputes that are so nasty. We don't have that kind of thing happening in criminal defense work. He, on the other hand, is doing work for, according to him, 38 law enforcement agencies. So he's doing prosecution work plus this civil federal. So if he goes out of business tomorrow, which appears to be happening, I will enjoy no benefit at all. I'm not going to get any clients. I can't do prosecution work because I would have to withdraw from the criminal defense associations that I belong to, and I'm not going to do that. I love the people I work with and the relationships I've made, and I'm not going to compromise any of that in order to pick up his clients. So other people are going to benefit from his demise, but I will not. So my motives are entirely about justice. It's about exposing a fraud, trying to protect the integrity of the legal system, trying to protect the integrity of the digital forensics profession. And that's it. And I'm doing it at great, great risk to myself and my family and my well-being, frankly. And regarding him feeling afraid or whatever, it's just laughable. I mean, I think we should ask, should he ever decide to grant an interview, what happened when he went to go apply for an order for protection? Of course, the answer is he didn't. He has no basis. I live here on the river. I don't drive over to wherever it is that he lives. I have no desire to hang out in the bushes or whatever at his house.
So it's kind of amazing that he's gotten away with it for so long, because
Yes.
he picked the exact wrong line of business to go into when you're constantly in court. You're constantly
Right.
asserting things under
Yeah.
penalty of perjury. And like, if he's been an expert in thousands of cases, he has potentially perjured himself in thousands of cases if he's attesting to things about his credentials that aren't true. Like, this is the wrong line of work to like build yourself up into something that you're not, being an expert witness.
Yeah, there's a thread here with these kinds of frauds. If you go back and look at the Jim Bates example in my article, after he was convicted, he defiantly told a journalist that, look, there was never a question about the quality of my work and whether degrees were needed. This is a witch hunt. It's a smear campaign. Yeah, it is a smear campaign. It's a campaign to eradicate a fraud, an individual who can't tell the truth under oath. And when someone is so comfortable lying so often, so regularly on podcasts, under oath, at depositions, in documents, on biographies, when someone is so comfortable, so boastful, so smug about it, then nothing that they say can be taken seriously. If you say you found a Bitcoin address and Mr. Allwine goes to prison for life without parole, you just can't take that on face value. You can't believe it. And that's really the problem. And when I talked about the thread or the commonality between Bates and Lanterman's saying the same thing in his statement to the magistrate. He says, all these years, nobody had a problem with me lying about my degrees. He didn't use the word lying. I'm inserting that, of course, but as a rhetorical flourish. But nobody had a problem with me lying about my degrees because the degrees really weren't essential to the work that I was doing. But yet here we are. Yeah, right, Mr. Lanterman, things have caught up with you. And more shockingly than that, we would expect him to, that's what frauds say when they get caught. More shockingly than that are the fact that lawyers are now making this argument on his behalf. Washington County just filed a reply brief in Mr. Allwine's habeas corpus petition. And there they said, even if he didn't go to Uppsala College, in other words, even if he lied for 25 years under oath about where he went to school, these degrees aren't essential to the work that he did to put this guy away for life. On a murder trial, the degrees weren't essential. Well, I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the degrees weren't essential, but the ability to tell the truth under oath, that is essential. That's one of the 4 requirements of a competent witness, which I discuss in the opening paragraph of my article. It's not just Washington County attorneys making this ludicrous argument. You've got the attorneys in the Alliance Laundry case down in the Northern District of Florida. If you sift through their 30-some-odd page reply, there's a little paragraph in there that says, yeah, we're looking into it, but, the degrees really aren't necessary. Who cares about the degrees, He's still a great expert, and he shouldn't be stricken. It boggles the mind. It's like we're in some kind of Twilight Zone or something, that any lawyers would make these kind of arguments with a straight face.
So here's the grand finale. If you've stuck with us this long through this episode, this is the part where we get into what's going to make the 4-part Netflix documentary such a big hit. And it's where I think potentially, Sean Harrington, you may have a conflict of interest. You may be angling for an executive producer role on this Netflix documentary. Because the scene where he goes to this suburban Pennsylvania police station, I believe, to acquire his employment records from the 90s.
Yeah.
And
Let me share how that happened. So back in 2023, I tried to go to Hopkins Police Department where he allegedly worked, and they confirmed that he was a detective. And I said, I'd like to get the employment records. I sent him a Data Practices Act request, which in Minnesota is the open records law procedure for getting stuff. And the response I got back was, oh, gosh, shucks, we don't have that anymore because of our retention policy. So sorry, we can't produce that. And I was disappointed. But, once I realized that nobody seemed to care about this stuff, the Minnesota Supreme Court didn't seem to care. The Office of the Lawyer's Professional Responsibility Board didn't take any action, literally told me to go pound sand. I mean, not literally, but even perhaps more forcefully than that. The St. Thomas College of Law took no action other than making a minor change in the biography that didn't even acknowledge my information. Metro State University still has them on the cyber board. They all ignored me. So I was like, okay, fine. If nobody else cares, then I guess I don't care either. I got my own life. I got clients. I need to get back to work. So I did. And it was 14 months later on a Friday afternoon, I was taking a nap and I got woke up in the middle of my nap from some Perkins Coie lawyer out of Portland, Oregon. And he says, hey, I'm doing some work here on a case and I wondered if you have a few minutes to talk about Mark Lanterman. And I sat up in bed and I said, oh, yeah, what do you need? And he had already done a lot of really good work. He already contacted the college, the registrar, to get records. He already raised the red flags. He gave a brutal deposition, as I'm sure you read. And he needed me to fill in some pieces about the Harvard University thing. I want to stop calling it the Harvard University because it's not. It's an online diploma mill that has licensed the names of Oxford, MIT, Stanford, and Harvard. You give them $3,500. Doesn't matter if you have a degree or have any college. You don't even have to be a high school graduate. And you go and you sit in on this thing for 8 weeks. And at the end of it, I assume there's an exam or something or a test or whatever. And you get a thing you can stick on your wall. That's what it is, okay? And the company that runs it is called GetSmarter, and the name that they've licensed is called Harvard X, or Harvard Online is the other name that they've licensed. So anyway, he said, well, do you have anything on that? I said, yeah, I called all 15 Harvard schools, and I finally found out where this was happening was this online program. Let me forward it to you. So I did. And we compared notes. He had some stuff that I hadn't found, and I had stuff he didn't find. And so I got reinvigorated. I got reinvested in this whole thing. That would be about 5 weeks ago. And so I started really pursuing everything and all these angles. And I remembered reading in a deposition somewhere that he had also went to a police or was employed by a police department in Pennsylvania. Now there are 3 Springfields there, 3 of them. This one is Springfield Township in Montgomery County. So I put it on my to-do list to contact them, and I didn't get around to it. I'm busy. I got stuff going on. I got kids and a family and work and whatever. But it was on my list. Now I don't know what day that was that the Perkins Coie lawyer called me. He had deposed Mark Lanterman on February 11th. So I don't know what the next Friday was. Maybe it was that day. Maybe it was the next day. I don't know. I finally decided to call the Springfield Township Police Department. So I called them. I hit number 3 for the detective line or whatever, because I figured that'd probably be the best place to go. And a guy answers the phone, and I told him why I'm calling. I said, yeah, there's a guy that used to work there years ago, and we think that he's got fake degrees, but I don't know for sure. I would like to, get a hold of his employment application and see what he put on there. So he puts me through, and I'm talking to this police chief. His name is Mike Pitko. And I give him the same spiel. I say, hey, there's a guy that used to work there, so he says. And I think he's a fraud. I don't know. But he's claiming some college degrees that we don't think he has. I'm trying to investigate this. I'd like to get a hold of his employment application. He worked back there, I think, in the 90s or something. And he goes, what'd you say the name was again? Did you say, I said Lanterman, Mark Tracy Lanterman. He goes, Lanterman, yeah, I knew there was something about that guy. And I said, what is it? He goes, yeah, well, you know what? He emailed me a couple of weeks ago, and he said he wanted to come in here and look at his personnel file. And then he came in here, told me he had some kind of a heart condition or something, a cardiac condition. His doctor told him to get his affairs in order, and he really wanted to have the file. There was, he had his department photo in there and stuff, and he asked me to give him the file. And at this point, I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you're allowed to do vulgarity on the show or not, but I said to this police chief who I've never met, I said, tell me you didn't give him the fucking file. Please tell me you didn't give him the fucking file. And he goes, yeah, I did. I believed him. And I said, and let me guess, you didn't make a copy of it. And he goes, no, I didn't. I took him at his word. Now I got to get that file back. Damn, I got to get that file back now. And I said, yeah, you think? I said, whatever you're going to get back is not going to be the file, if you get anything back at all. I said, I can't fucking believe this. Fuck me. You gave the guy the file? And so it turns out, if you start looking back at the chronology, and I got the emails, by the way. I asked him to forward me the emails, and he did. And I then sent them to the Perkins Coie lawyer. And again, that lawyer, he really good, sharp lawyer. He didn't want to use my forwarded emails. He called the police chief and got his own emails forwarded. So my name's not even in it. So nobody can question my motives at all. I'm not part of the case anymore, right? And he got the same story from the police chief. So he files a sworn affidavit, declaration as a lawyer in a federal case about the whole thing about the terminal illness and all this stuff. And so it was really great. But if you look at the timing on it, he was deposed on February 11th by Dave Watnick, the attorney. And February 12th, he emails the police chief and says, hey, I just wanted to check if my personnel file has been destroyed pursuant to the retention policy. Can you mind confirming that for me? And the police chief writes back and says, no, it's not. As a matter of fact, we don't destroy records for anyone that's retired or resigned. And then the next day on the 13th, he says, okay, do you mind if I drop by tomorrow to take a look? And the police chief replies and says, sure. Yeah, we can do that. Do you have any concerns about what's in the file? Nope, no concerns. See you then. And then he shows up on February 14th, 3 days after the deposition, flies from wherever, Minnesota to Pennsylvania, or let's just say for the sake of argument, he was given a talk in New Hampshire, because I think around that time frame he might have been in New Hampshire at a conference. He stops in Pennsylvania, goes and picks up this personnel file, and as of March 19th, he still hadn't mailed it back. According to the police chief, in an email I have, he told the police chief he had mailed it on a Saturday, which would have been March 1st, and as of the 19th, which is the last time I checked, he still didn't have the file. So, I can see an argument here. Oh, it got lost in the mail, yeah.
Just to emphasize the timeline, he's challenged about his credentials on a day, and then 3 days later, he's in Pennsylvania, absconding with his personnel records that could prove maybe he's not been telling the truth about his credentials. Takes them, he shouldn't be taking them. Doesn't return them. There are no copies. It's just the most damning piece of evidence is this crazy story about him going to Pennsylvania to cover up for his decades-long fraud here.
And he had no idea that I would possibly learn this information and get a hold of these emails. You wouldn't believe it if I didn't have the emails. I mean, he had no idea that I was able to do this. And so, of course, that made its way into the federal case down in the Northern District of Florida. And there's some other cases. He's involved right now in at least 6 pending federal cases that I know of, including the District for Vermont. I think it's the Northern District of California in a very high profile case there, and several others. One of them happened here in Minnesota and got closed out on the 14th in front of Judge Blackwell. And Lanterman's lawyer, Chris Maddle, who has floated a run for governor, he was counsel of record. So, I had notified Maddle back in October and November of 2023 about his client's fraud. I'm not going to call him client anymore. I'm going to call him his friend, because that's how Maddle identifies him, as being his friend, his close friend. Yes, there's an attorney-client relationship, or there was, perhaps until very recently. He was counsel of record, and so he knew that Lanterman's claims were false. Now, he's taking the position that he didn't know because he chose to believe Lanterman over me, but really he didn't choose to believe Lanterman over me. He chose to believe Lanterman, so he says, over a document from the registrar. I have some additional information that I won't disclose right now that he knew from an independent source, and this is contained in my reply brief to the ethics complaint that's currently pending. But I have information that I have gathered from a witness that I have forwarded to the authorities where Mr. Maddle had learned from an independent source other than me that his client did not have these degrees. Now that is just an allegation at this point by a witness, which I have forwarded to the authorities, and it will need to be investigated. So I want to make very clear that is all it is at this point, is an allegation, but that complaint is now pending that he suborned perjury in that case. There are one or two other cases still happening, still open here in Minnesota, and I've notified attorneys. I didn't hear back. I haven't logged on to see if they have notified the court, and maybe that's something for a journalist to do. There's only so much time for me to be devoting to this matter.
So back to the Pennsylvania thing. So the reason that's important is his records will potentially omit that he attended this college that he now claims to have attended and graduated from. That no one can prove that he has. So if he left it off of his his Pennsylvania Police Department employment records, then it's evidence that he's made it up in the time since, right?
Yeah, I think I'd like to find out exactly when he started doing it. I know in 2005 he was involved in a case called Faust versus McFarland, and if you have a chance to get down to the courthouse, maybe you can inspect those records because they're not available electronically, and I'm not making the trip down to go find them, but I'd like to see if he started claiming it in 2005 or in any earlier case that he was involved in. But even if you found that those employment application records left it off, while that seems very probative and powerful, you're still dealing with arguments from people, preposterous arguments from people like Chris Maddle and others that, so what? You can't prove a negative. So what if he left it off? I mean, it was a school nobody had ever heard of. Maybe he wasn't proud of his bachelor or master's degree, and he just elected to leave it off, which I would think would be a falsification if you're asked to disclose your education and you leave something off like that. But whatever, right? We have enough evidence now that we know he's lying. We have a 2017 deposition where he states that he was at the University of Minnesota for a year and a half. And we have him in the U of M student directory for the 85 and 86 school year. We have a February 11th of this year deposition where he says he was in New Jersey for 6 straight contiguous years going to this college, where he allegedly graduated in 88 and 90. So you can't be in Minnesota for a year and a half and also be in New Jersey for 6 years straight at the same time. It's impossible. So he either lied in one or the other or both. Now, I'll leave it up to the finder of fact or the audience to decide which or whether both he lied. But yeah, you can't be in both, and it's just one of many other examples, not being able to name one student that he attended the school, not able to name a professor, not able to produce any records of scholarship or tuition aids, Pell Grant applications, anything, nothing, zero. Again, that's just a dearth of evidence, but I'm more interested in the fact that I've got deposition A, B, and C, and they all have conflicting, contradictory information. He's under oath, and he's giving false statements about them. The Harvard thing is another example. He claims in one deposition that he attended a 9-month program, 9 months at Harvard University, which for last time I checked, it's in Cambridge. I have a relative buried in the graveyard in Cambridge. He claims that he was there in 2012 for a 9-month program. Of course, I knew all along and that it was, in fact, a 2018 8-week program for a certificate. So, he lied under oath there as well. I don't know what else I need to prove up here on this, frankly.
Well, I could not have predicted that we would talk about Mark Lanterman for an entire hour. And thank you for joining me for this conversation. It's fascinating. I look forward to the Netflix documentary. Is there anything that we've left out of this conversation, you think?
Oh, plenty, but we only have an hour. So I think we covered a lot. I think that there'll be no shortage of interesting stuff for you to cover over the next several weeks and months.
Well, Sean Harrington, thank you for joining me. I'm your host, John Edwards. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.